Tim Walz, of course, no investments whatsoever, which is just
Tim Walz
a
is
travesty.
a joke of a candidate and a joke of a governor. And the fact that we elect people who don't know what a venture... How can you even say that? I don't know what a venture capitalist does. Like that, I'm sorry, that's crazy.
I don't
that's
know
a crazy
if
thing.
he was saying that in a literal sense. I like to think that he kind of knows what a venture capitalist is.
It's even worse if he said it in a figurative sense. If he says it in a literal sense, I'm like, okay, you're just an idiot. But if he says it in a figurative sense, meaning like, I don't even know what a venture capitalist does to earn his money, that's so much worse. Because what that's saying is that a venture capitalist is essentially a leech on society who needs to be punished for the venture capitalism, right? Because if the idea is, I know what they do. What they do is they invest in companies, and sometimes the companies succeed and sometimes they fail. But I don't even know what he does. He provides the capital that allows companies to get started. That's what a venture capital, if you don't understand the importance of that, right? If you can read it one of two ways, as you say. He doesn't understand what it is, or he doesn't understand the importance of the thing. It's worse if he doesn't understand the importance of the thing.
I mean, I think he was trying to come off as more relatable. And as we discussed, most people are financially illiterate. So they're like, I don't know what a venture capitalist is either. So it kind of like works for them.
I agree with you. I think most people see venture capital as leeches. They see investors as leeches.
People that trade algorithms, that's like a negatively connotated thing.
But if he says that, he's reinforcing the idea that, hey, I'm just a guy like everyone else.
I mean, I agree. And I think that that's really bad. I don't like politicians who pander to the American people along the lines of ignorance. I don't like it on either side. I see this all the time. Hey, my personal bugaboo, the thing that I hate the most, is when politicians will say that they're out. We've talked about this before. They are out to get you, and your own failures in your life are probably the result of some shadowy conspiracy that's out to get you. Okay, that may be true, but I'm going to need a description of what that looks like. Okay, the truth is the vast majority of failure in life in a free country like the United States is probably because you made a bad decision. That's true for all of us. We all make bad decisions. We all fail. We've all had failures. We've all had successes. Hopefully you have more successes than failures. You learn from the failures. You can have future successes. The mark of an economically successful individual is somebody who fails and looks in the mirror and says, what did I do wrong so that I can fix that and then do better the next time? The mark of economic failure is something goes wrong and you immediately go, what external factors led to me failing here? What did I do? Not what did I do wrong? What did society do wrong to me? Because the truth is, in most cases, it's not that society did something wrong. And if it was society that did something wrong, it's usually on such a grand scale that nothing that you personally do is capable of fixing that. Now, you can take political corrective action, and there are times in American history where you really needed those big sort of social movements. However, there is something to be said for the fact that if you want to take the biggest social movement, most important social movement of all time in the United States, the civil rights movement, deeply important, deeply necessary. As far as the economic trajectory of Black Americans, it was actually stronger before the civil rights movement. That's not a case against the civil rights movement. That's a case that the things that make you economically successful, it is more important the thing you do in your daily life to make yourself economically successful, even than a bad system, which is an amazing thing. The bad system needs to change for sure. It needs to go away. But Black middle class wealth was growing at a higher rate before the civil rights. Why? And that's because along with the civil rights movement came something called the welfare state. If those had been disconnected, then that would have been way better. If the civil rights movement had come along and said, we are getting rid of legal discrimination, it's bad, it's wrong, it's violated the 14th Amendment, phenomenal. And then if it hadn't also said, okay, well, but we also need to construct a welfare state that is going to pay people for having children out of wedlock and compensate for all of the systemic discrimination of the past, that creates a system of perverse incentives. I'm not saying that was on purpose, but that is what it actually created. Again, none of this, for Media Matters, is a case against the Civil Rights Act or against the Civil Rights Movement, which is a wonderful, necessary, absolutely morally just thing. That is a case that when it comes to individual decision-making, the single most important thing you can do in your life to build wealth is to make good individual decisions. And nothing you do politically is going to equate to those things in 99.99999% of cases.
So what do you think some of the biggest non-issues are today that are being discussed too much?
The wealth inequality. I think wealth inequality is a horseshit issue. I think it's stupid. I think on its face, it's stupid. The reason I say that is because why do you possibly care what a rich person is worth? You should only care about what the poor person is worth. Meaning that if a poor person is getting richer, it is just human jealousy that makes you look at the rich guy across the street and say, yeah, but he's getting richer faster. That's just Cain and Abel kind of stuff. This kind of wealth inequality idea is shot through with the lie that the wealthy guy got rich because you're poorer than he is. That all economic growth is a factor of exploitation. And that isn't remotely true. So I hate the wealth inequality conversation. I also think it tends to end around the real question, which is income trajectory differences. Like, why are people having a different income trajectory? So when people say wealth inequality, it's a great way of baking in a bunch of systemic factors that are beyond anybody's control. So they'll say, well, people inherited wealth from their grandparents. Okay, the reality is that the vast majority of wealth in the United States is not generational. It passed down generation to generation. The vast majority of people who are millionaires and billionaires in the United States are not millionaires and billionaires because they inherited millions and billions from their parents. Right? Pretty much every billionaire that I know actually grew up poor to middle class. And that's the wonderful thing about America. It's the incredible thing about America. But wealth inequality masks the reality, which is that if you want to build generational wealth, you have to have generational income. Right? Then you have to generate generational income for your company. And then you have wealth in your company because you own stock in something that's creating generational income. Right? I care much more about income than wealth because wealth is sort of the stagnant measurement of income.
It's interesting because that's actually something that surprisingly I still don't understand. Graham has gotten a lot of hate for, which is some of his most popular videos are, if you skip out on Starbucks every day, if you just put $5 into a Roth IRA or an index fund, in 40 years, you'll have $1.6 million, like based off of 100 years of data of returns of the S&P 500. And he gets hate for that when he's promoting something that's like clearly just, when
I do things to save money and they say, why is he doing this to save money? He's worth so much, and they hate on the idea that like I'd rather still make coffee at home.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think that's because what you do when you say that is it's not that hard to make money in the United States over time, which is true. But what does that do? It throws the responsibility for making money back on the person who could put the $5 bill back in their pocket instead of shelling it out at Starbucks. And that's what people don't like. People get very angry when they are told that perhaps you ought to make a different decision. They like it much better when they're told the system is screwing you, and that's the reason why you're spending so much money at Starbucks, instead of asking the question you're asking, which is, do you really have to spend the money at Starbucks? Or could you just go down to the local Publix and pick up like a bag of ground beans and then just make it at home with like a French press and just do that over and over and over and save money? Like people, all human beings, right, left, center, we all have an innate desire, and it's a bad part of us that wants to shirk responsibility and suggest that our failures are not our own. And that's why you have to cultivate virtue. This is why virtue is a very, very important thing. Again, I'll come back to the religious point. It's the difference between one of the things that's happened in our society that's really, really bad and dark is that the government has replaced church and society. And I mean that in terms of the economic functionality of church. Forget about the God of it. Okay, forget about the religion. The way that it works in my synagogue is when somebody loses their job, first, everybody gets together and we start a meal train. We make sure that person is taken care of, their kids are taken care of, and all of that. And then we start putting out feelers to get that person a job because we know that person, we know their kids. But the person who's receiving all of this understands that this is actually a burden on the rest of the community, right? They know the person who's signing them the check and the person who's doing the meal train, which requires gratitude. And it also means that they don't want to take that always, right? They would like to not take it, actually. They would like to go and get the job. Okay, now, remove that function, which means they now feel a duty toward the rest of the community to go out and find a job and maybe even take a job they don't want to take just so that they don't have to be a burden on the community. Now, think about it once government takes over that role. Government sees the person who lost the job and says, here we are. We are money, right? You don't know us. You've never met us. You don't know the people who are signing the check. This is why it drives me nuts when politicians of both parties say, I created X jobs. You didn't create shit, my friend. Like Donald Trump didn't create jobs and Joe Biden didn't create jobs because none of those people are hiring using their dollars. Okay, Donald Trump created jobs in his own private sector life, but the idea that like the government is what's the job creator is a lie. That's not true. You can create conditions that make it easier for people to hire, which is maybe what they're trying to say, but that's not the way that it comes off. When government comes into a situation where somebody is down on their luck and then they sign a check, no attendant sense of duty then befalls the person. This is why the shift from benefits to entitlements linguistically is really quite negative. Once somebody feels they're entitled to the thing, then it's like, okay, well, but what do I owe to the government? Do I owe to the government like a necessity to like go and get a job? Like how hard do I have to work? Do I have to take that job that maybe I wouldn't have taken if I weren't, being paid by if I didn't have to? Like that, it changed. In the movie Cinderella Man, you remember Russell Crowe's character? He takes welfare for a while. You remember there's a scene where he goes back into the welfare office after he's made it as a boxer, James Braddock, and he carries a wad of rolls and he sets it back on the counter and he gives it back. Can you imagine anybody doing that? You can't. But you know what happens all the time in communities where you know the person who's giving to you? That sort of stuff happens all the time. I've personally floated loans to people who can't afford their mortgage. I do it all the time. And you know what happens? They pay me back. And they feel an obligation to pay me back. And they feel bad about taking the money. And it's not that they should feel, guilty or terrible. If you need to do it, you need to do it. But they understand that there is a cost to somebody else in doing the thing.